Happy Monday. We are back with Mondays with Coach Rice at Casting the Net. Reeling in holistic health is what we do here. And I have a special guest with me today, um, Donna Schlachter, right? Did I say that right?
Schlachter rhymes
Schlachter.
with doctor.
Uh, Acclaimed author, storyteller, writing coach. And we're here to discuss the transformative power of accountability. And so, Donna, tell us where you're from and
I'm
how did you come to this journey of being a writer?
so I'm originally from Canada. I was born as far east as you can get in Canada without falling off the edge in Newfoundland. A lot of people pronounce it Newfoundland, but it's natives call it Newfoundland. And yeah, so I got to this journey, I guess. I always liked to tell stories when I was a kid, especially if they had a horse or a dog or a cat or something in them. And sometimes my stories got really wild, and my mom would say, "Now stop telling fibs," because I know that didn't really happen. But I guess that the love of story was really born in me right from a very young age. I started writing stories when I was about in third grade about horses and cats and dogs and so on.
Okay.
And yeah, and then when I moved from Canada to the US, my husband was very supportive of my writing. And so that really made it easy for me to continue writing. And I've been writing ever since I have lived here, which is over 25 years.
Oh, wow. What type of writing do you do?
Well, I have done a little bit of everything. At the beginning, I thought it would be easy to write children's stories because, well, they're easy to write. Well, they're not. But I did write, and I actually took a correspondence course back in the day where you actually mailed your assignments in, and took a children's course, and that didn't go out very far. I thought still, however, that writing short would be easy, so I wrote devotionals and poetry, and boy, you can't get much shorter than a greeting card. I even tried writing greeting cards, magazine articles, church bulletin articles, you name it. I've written just about everything. And finally, I got to the point where I wondered, because none of that was being successful. I wondered, did I have one book in me, just one? And that's really where I started.
So, how does, I know you do a lot of accountability work. Tell us about what is accountability to you? What does that mean to you?
So I think for me, it means that I'm a person of my word. I do what I say I'm going to do when I say I'm going to do it. There's lots of catchphrases around. We hear words like take ownership of a project or a process, take personal responsibility. And that does, it comes down to a lot of that there is responsibility included. I think though that, it's not just somebody standing with a whip, over you, or a two by four waiting to smack you if you get out of line. Because I think accountability has a lot more positive attributes than those kind of negative things that we can sometimes get stuck on.
That's true. That is so true. And now, how does that collaborate or tie in with writing?
So the way that I see it, and the way that I see it working in my life and in my clients' lives, is accountability, or I should start with when you sit down to write something, whatever it is, and it could be something as short as a greeting card, but you have a purpose in mind. And so you sort of set that goal for yourself. I want to get this, written by whatever date. So you start setting some deadlines. You work backwards from those deadlines, which I don't like to call them that. I like to call them lifelines, because once you get it and once you meet that, then you can get on with the rest of your life, so to speak.
Okay.
But
I like
the
that.
other thing that I think it does is, I talk to a lot of people who would say, well, I've been a failure at pretty much everything I've ever done. I've never finished anything I started. And for those people, writing can be especially therapeutic in a very positive way, in that they actually finish something. Again, something like a greeting card or a little poem, a little rhyming poem, even, can really give that sense of accomplishment to somebody. It can build skill sets in grammar and vocabulary, can open their minds, to imagination, which maybe they never really exercised in their lives before. And I think it just really empowers people, and gives them a feeling of success, that they don't always fail at everything they've ever tried. And especially if you're just writing for yourself as an exercise in accountability, even perhaps, it gives you that opportunity. You get edified along the way, you learn some new skills along the way. And then now you have something that you can teach somebody else, especially to your kids, which I think is really important, to teach our kids how to write, not just school assignments, not just, book reports, but rather to actually write from something like deep within their soul, deep within that creative part of our souls.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think it's great to teach your children how to journal because they don't know how to express their emotions, and that's a great way to be able to do that.
Hmm.
In writing, it actually enhances their ability to be more creative because they releasing all of the information on paper.
Right. And the very active writing, it's very tactile. And so it works on a different part of our brain than sitting at a keyboard. And we'll remember the things that we write with a pen or a pencil, the scratching on the paper even, which a pencil will do. The pens don't do that so much anymore. But back in the days of the feather quills, that was how kids learned in school, when they were doing their letters and so on. They would remember that because of that connection between the hands and your brain that's different than
Right.
just reading something off of a piece of paper, or even listening and then having to sort of memorize it and repeat it back. But when you look at a lot of our conversation that goes on, it's all very much storytelling. And so teaching, somebody to be accountable through writing teaches them the art of storytelling. And that is, you got to start somewhere, and there has to be an interesting middle, and then you want like some kind of a surprising or a satisfying ending. And you hear it all the time. You go to dinner with strangers and they'll say, "So tell me about yourself." You'll go to a job interview, and what does the person interviewing you say? "Tell me something about yourself." And so you want to be able to share those stories, and writing them down is definitely the place to start.
Oh, okay. So, as a writing coach, what is your onboarding process?
So my onboarding is, um, and it depends on which way you come to me. I coach people who want to learn how to write a book, and so that could come. We might do a one on, a one-on-one sort of, and an interview, we'll call it, where the client gets to interview me, and I get to interview them a little bit, see if we might be a good fit, talk about the project. But really, the goal is in that meeting is for me to be able to offer some suggestions, I guess, to give them some resources so that they can take that and run with it. And some people do. That's as much help as they need. They just sort of need to know the next step. And then the other side of it is that I also offer, a program for people who aren't necessarily writers and don't really think of themselves as wanting to write, but I teach them how to tell and share and save family and personal stories. Sometimes, folks want to do that to pass it on to future generations. Sometimes you'll talk to people and they'll say, I have got a very interesting story and I really think it would help people. And many people do have those kinds of stories. They've come out of deep trauma, deep hurt. They've come out of diseases or mental health problems. And through whatever that process is, they believe, and it's often true, this could help somebody else who's going through the same thing. And so I also help with that. And so it's not strictly memoirs, but it could be. It could be memoir based. But really, it's all about the structure, once again, of telling a story. I don't know. My grandma used to tell me stories all the time when I was a kid. I wish I paid more attention. But sometimes the stories weren't all that interesting. They were very real to her. She knew these people. In a lot of cases, she had been right there when it happened. but she wasn't really a storyteller. She didn't quite know what to leave out and what, sometimes people will kind of argue themselves out of a story like, well, I don't remember if that was a Tuesday or Wednesday, and I don't remember if that was 1934 or 1935. I was like, get on with it. I want to know. And, but you can lose your audience if you don't get the structure down well. So whether you want to write the stories down or whether you want to just share them, now with the technology, it's so easy. You can record them on a digital recorder and transfer it to CD. You can video it with your phone, most phones, smartphone, or have one of your teenagers or something, like do a video of you telling stories, or start with one story, one that's really close to your heart and you know all the details and you don't have to argue yourself out of it. And that is a gift for families that is priceless. And I'll share a quick story if I may.
Oh, absolutely.
So my father was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer in 2014, and he knew he didn't have a long time to live. But the good news is that about 2 years before that, he had said to me, I want to write my life story, but I don't know where to start. So I want you to write my life story. That was really what he meant all along. And that was fine. So we would go visit. He would winter in the Phoenix area. So my husband and I, we would drive down a couple of times a year and we'd visit with him, and I would record. He'd start telling me stories and we'd record it. I would type it out when I got home and send it off to him, and he'd make any corrections, and we'd go on and keep going that way, chapter by chapter. So when he was diagnosed in 2014 with pancreatic cancer, which most people go, ooh, when you hear that, and it was that type. By that time, I had his book done, and it went up to like the first 50 years of his life. So I was able to bring that. Well, the day he got put into hospice, the intake counselor was there, and she was asking questions like, tell me what you did with your life, George. Well, he was a great storyteller, and so he started telling her all these stories. Some of them I'd never heard before, by the way, and I kept saying, what? You didn't tell me that. That's not in the book. And after a while, he just laid back and he said, well, if you want to know any more, you'll need to read the book. So she said to him, book? What book? And he pointed to the bookcase, because I had brought copies of the book with me. I was just thrilled that he was able to see the book finally. And he said, the book over there, that's my life story, or at least the first half of it. And she said she had been in that line of work for about 35 years. And she had heard lots of people say, I wish I'd written my stories down. I wish I'd, saved them somehow. And lots of kids who said, oh, I wish I'd listened better to Dad's stories. I wish I'd listened to Grandma's stories. And she said, but you're the first person who ever did. And that really opened my eyes and opened my heart. I was so proud for him because he had done the hard work. I just transcribed, I was just the transcriber in the midst of all of this. And he did all the hard work. And he was the one who was brave enough to get his story down. He started when he said to me, I want to write my life story. He said, my story is not unique, but it is different. And it was all about the circumstances of his birth and his parents and who they were and who they weren't, and who they were in relation to who we knew them as, and so on. So, not a unique story, but different. And it was, I think, therapeutic for him, and also liberating, because by that time he had found his birth family.
Oh,
He,
wow.
yes, which thrilled him to no end. I mean, he really was excited. He called me the night that he talked to one of his half sisters, and it was just, you could hear the excitement. He was like a kid at Christmas again. So, yeah. So we called his book A Family by George, because
That
his name
is,
was George.
that really touched my heart because he had a chance to tell his story, and you had the honor of writing it,
Yes.
not just writing it, but the memories of the
Yep.
journey of
Yep.
writing. That's
Yes.
powerful.
Yes, yes. And there were things that had happened in his life that I never knew about. So it was really exciting to hear all that. I was given some creative license, because he couldn't always remember the exact details and couldn't remember, how it is
Yeah.
when you're writing these stories. You don't always remember the exact conversation, but you know the gist of the
Right.
conversation. right? You know some of the people who were there, but maybe not everybody. So I was given some license, and there was actually a story there. Part of our research came from my grandfather, his father's um, books from his store, which, his record keeping. And in one of these, as I was looking there, I found airship lands on harbor. And I thought, oh, ooh, this was like the 1920s. I thought, how exciting. I had envisioned, like the big gas filled helium or helium filled balloon type ship, and wrote an entire scene with that in it. And then my dad said, no, actually, it was an airplane, a small airplane that landed on the harbor. I said, oh, I have to change all that. That's not quite as exciting. But anyway.
That's
So, that's a
incredible.
different book. Yeah, that's a different book.
That's
But
incredible.
and then there were some stories he told me that he'd never told anybody else. And so when the book came out and my family read through it, my sister discovered that there was an instance when he was babysitting her two sons while they went on a cruise, and a hurricane went through Newfoundland at that time, had come up the eastern seaboard and all the way along. And he had the boys up in the attic while he perched on the railing of a balcony in a three-story house and was trying to hammer the corner of the roof back down again. And so he said, she'll probably never let me babysit the kids again, but by that time they were teenagers. So yeah, she said, no, if I'd known that happened, he'd have never been left with them again. But the story, it came from one of the grandkids, and my dad substantiated it. And but one of the grandkids, he said, we could see when the wind came through and the roof would lift, and we could see Grandpa outside furiously trying to hammer the roof back into place, with like 4 and 6 inch nails that he had.
That's pretty cool. But I mean,
Yeah.
that is amazing. So from your experience as a writing coach, how do you deal with clients who want to start writing but feel like everybody else's book is already out there? What do I have special to say?
Right. And that's what I hear so often. I don't have anything special. I didn't do anything. I didn't go anywhere. Because they just live life. We don't see in the moment, we don't see the uniqueness and the specialness of what's going on a lot of times till you look back on it, right? And so when I talk to people who kind of have that mindset, I have to remind them that they are unique and their story is unique and nobody else can tell their story. And so a lot of times what I find the best way to get started is just to get them to write something short, like write me out like 3 sentences about your earliest memory. Now, not all memoirs are chronological and they don't all go back to being a child, but some are. And so it's always a good way to kind of stimulate the memories, because usually it's sort of like when you're sitting in a room full of people and one tells a joke, that hits something in your brain, right? So then you remember the punchline of a joke and you tell the joke, and then the next person. And the next thing you know, you're fighting for joke time, right?
Right.
A lot of times that's how it is with the memories of our stories as well. Or if there's a special story that they remember from their parents or their grandparents. And so many people that I've talked to, once they kind of start to remember that, then they end up maybe writing a full book, uh, and creative fiction, we'll call it again, because they don't have even the resources. They don't have the people around anymore to even ask for the questions, to verify facts. But they'll write a book about how my grandparents met, or how my great grandparents came here on a ship from wherever. And I think that is a real sense of accomplishment, then, that they've done something worthwhile because they've saved this story, not just for themselves, because that's already in their head, but they've saved it for the kids, who probably didn't listen completely, and didn't
Right.
always tune in, because we don't, right? When it's our
We don't.
parents, sometimes it takes that next generation, but then when we can leave it for our grandparents and generations beyond, I remind them they're not writing this story for themselves. They're writing it for 4 or 5
Generations.
generations down the road. And just think, like, if none of the men who wrote the Bible if they never wrote down those stories, how much we would miss,
That's so true.
right? And the history of the United States, the good, the bad, the ugly, and all of it. If that wasn't written down at the time, then we wouldn't have as good a record as we have now, because I wouldn't know what the history was without reading something that was written at the time. So, yeah, that contemporaneous writing is so important, and it's important for us and our stories as well.
I think it's very unique what you do too, because having that accountability to to have someone encourage you along the way, to
Yes,
say, did you do
yes.
this, did you meet the deadline, did you make sure you do, just having that is so powerful.
Right. The encouragement, the new skills that you learn, how to
Yes.
structure sentences, how to structure paragraphs so that they make sense and they segue into the next one. A lot of people haven't written a thing since they left school. And there are people who didn't make it all the way through school, so may not have even gotten to that technical writing type thing or into college classes. So it's really important to save the stories and also be able to tell them in a way that makes them interesting, that they make sense, that you're not confusing your reader. And so that's just a real heart passion of mine ever since my dad's story, and being part of that and helping him write that.
That is so nice, because people, that's what I mean, that's what's needed now, because people want to tell you. It's so awesome that we have so many different things utilizing technology where we can talk into the phone and it start writing, and we
Yeah,
edit it the best way we know how, right, and then send it
right.
off. But it's good that we have these tools, that it's not a typewriter anymore. It's
Right.
we've come a long way, and so
Yes, yes,
so it's
yes.
great to have that that
Absolutely.
that
Yep.
that that ability, but to have a coach to help you through it that's written so many books.
Right.
How many books have you written so far, you said?
More than 60.
Okay, I figured that. And
Yeah.
so, just, you have the experience. You wrote more than 60 books. That's
Yes.
awesome. So,
Yeah.
um, what advice would you give someone who want to, you know, start to write, but a little hesitant?
So I would say just start out very small. Again, you could jot down 3 sentences about your earliest memory, or your first day of school, if you remember that far back, or um, and especially if you're happen to be, dealing with somebody who's got like Alzheimer's or dementia, one of those memory killing diseases. It can be very frustrating because that long term memory is the thing that starts to go first. Um, and so you really want to start getting stories down. If you are trying to help somebody elderly who is struggling with some of those stories, take them back a decade at a time.
Hmm.
Say, well, what do you remember about that vacation you took with dad, or that cruise you took 10 years ago? Start with about 10 years back. Hey, even some of us, right? I mean, we're all getting to an age probably where the memory is not quite as sharp. It always tickles my funny bone when I get together with my 4 siblings and we start talking about some memory that one of us has. And we were all there, all of course, obviously at different ages. There's 13 years between me and the youngest one. And so we all see things and remember them through the lens of what age we were, what was going on in our lives at the time. A young married couple is not going to remember quite the same things as somebody a few years later when the little kids are not running around and they're not so sleep deprived, for example. But absolutely, just start small. And then, don't be afraid to ask questions of anybody else that you might know who was involved in that memory. Just say, hey, I was thinking about it, and, let's fill in some gaps I might have. And that can be, get a great conversation going with that person. And it can also help you with, because you wonder sometimes, am I losing my mind? Did I completely, blow off that vacation? Because I don't remember it, right?
Right.
And yet somebody say something like, oh yeah, that was the time that every day we had to wear a different color t-shirt. We all wore blue shirts one day and green shirts and another. And one of the like a little one, somebody who was little, young at that time might say, "Oh yes," and I hated when we all had to wear pink because he's a boy and he doesn't like to wear pink, maybe or something. So yeah, and I think you know that's a great place to start. Photo albums are another great place. Nobody keeps them much anymore, but if you have some, especially from when your families were younger, or kids are smaller or whatever, absolutely use that as a resource, because those will remind you of places that you've been and things that you did, and it'll just lead to a chain thing, like the joke circle. The memories will start to come back, and the more you remember, then the more you're going to remember even from that. So um, and like, don't, if you struggle and you can't even write 3 sentences of the earliest memory that you have, well, it's obviously not a good memory. Go to the next one. Maybe you're a little bit older. So many of our memories are not things we actually remember, but they are things that other people have told us happened.
That's true.
And those sometimes can be, depending on whether they were good storytellers or not, that can be sharper in our mind than an actual memory. And I have one of those. I was about 4. I was out riding my tricycle. This is what my father told me. And one of the bigger boys off the street came and pushed me off my bike and stole my bike, my tricycle. And I went home, and my dad was looking after me that day. Mom was at work. She was a nurse. And I went in the house, and he said, "Well, what's wrong?" I was crying. He said, "Well," I said, "Well, so-and-so pushed me off my bicycle and took my bike and won't give it back. Will you come and take it from him for me? Will you get it back for me?" And he said, "If you want your bike, you need to go get your bike." I'm 4 years old, right? And this kid was like 7 or 8. I remember he was a monster, okay? Anyway, I guess I went out. I wanted my bike back. And I went up to him. I pushed him off my bike and took my bike and started riding. About 15 minutes later, I was home. I guess I think I took my bike home because I wanted to make sure I was going to keep it. Anyway, a knock came at the door, and my dad answered it, and there was a man there with a little boy. And he said, "Your daughter pushed my son off of his bike and took it." And my dad said, "I think if you look at it, you'll find it's her bike. He took it first." And the father, from what my dad said, looked at the kid and said, "You didn't tell it to me that way." And off he went, and I'm sure he got in a lot of trouble. So see, I have no recollection of that, except from he told that story to me,
Right.
half a dozen times or more that I can recall. And every time in my mind, of course, it blew up and got bigger and bigger and bigger. But that's one of those remembered memories, though. So I
Right.
can honestly say I remember that. Um, but I do have memories of even earlier than that. But it's funny that I don't remember that one yet. I would have thought I would have been pretty, proud of myself. But
But you're right. Just I like that. Just start, because I wish I had stories that, because when I think about how amazing my parents were, I know they had some good stories, because just living my journey in life with them was amazing.
yep,
And I have my stories, but man, I wish I would have heard some of their stories back when they were younger or my age or something like that. So
yes,
I
yep,
would love to have. I will. That's why I'm working on my a couple of things that I'm doing, because I do want to tell my story. I do want. I have so many things I want to do and get it out, and so I get it. It's you right. Just do it.
yep,
And get the
yes,
help you need to get it out.
hmm, yeah,
So
yeah.
how can
I think.
oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Sorry, I was just going to say, I think that, like, even from a marketplace point of view, that writing, learning how to write and tell a story well, that'll help you, in school, college. It'll help you as an employee, because you become a better employee. It might also ignite entrepreneurial skills or leadership skills that you have that you don't even realize, when you see that you can be accountable to yourself for this writing project, and then you can do it, and so that will make you feel very successful. Whoops, I think my camera just
That's true.
dropped.
That's okay.
Hang on here, we'll fix that, I hope. There we go, I tapped something. Okay, there we go.
Isn't that cool
All
how we
right.
could just
Okay. Yeah, so And like I said before, it activates your imagination and enables you then to see the world in a different way and see the
Yes.
what if. So many people are very pragmatic and practical and feel like they don't have imagination. And yet, once they start writing, that process is very liberating and can, just open the floodgates really of the imagination. So that's another neat sort of side effect of how writing can
The,
just open up those doors for
the benefits,
creativity. It is a
yes.
creative process.
So tell the audience how can they reach you if they want to know more about getting coached, if they want to have a writing coach, because I think it's important.
Yeah. So right now, the probably the best way is through my website, and I'm actually next week I'm launching a new program about writing, leave a legacy. It's called Write Your Life Story or Your Personal Story. And so if they want to hop on over to my website, do you want me to read it out here?
You can it's up to you. I mean, even though I'm gonna put the links in once you send them to me.
Okay,
So
we'll put the links in, but it's yeah. So you can just hop on over there, and it's a 4-day launch next week, 4 1-hour sessions, Tuesday through Friday, and it's free, and you can come on over, and if you register, if something happens and you can't attend, then you can always, I'll be sending out the recording link in the evening, so you don't have to miss anything. And it'll give you everything you really need to know in order to get started. If you're kind of one of those self-starters who can take the information and process it and then run with it, then that's great. And then during that time, I'll also be talking about how if you wanted to enroll in my upcoming program, then how you can do that.
well, okay. Well, thank you so much, and
Thank you very much.
thank you so much for listening to the just thanking you audience for listening to us and um, showing us that that you want to learn more about different things, but continue to um, watch us on YouTube, Apple, and Spotify, and definitely subscribe and follow. If you feel this video was helpful, please do share with someone else. Thank you for listening, and thank you, Donna, for coming on today. I am super excited about what you're doing, and so
Thank you.
thank you very much for the time.